People thought they had just saved a presidential candidate. They thought the country had narrowly escaped a tragedy, another headline that could have shattered a nation in seconds. But the truth is, that night, someone didn't just pull a trigger. Someone signed a sentence, quietly, efficiently, one that could echo far beyond one campaign stage and reach the entire world. The rally looked almost celebratory at first. Floodlights washed the stage in bright white, flags rippled behind the podium. The crowd moved like a single living wave. Chants, cheers, phone screens held high, the sound of thousands of voices pressing into the microphones. And at the center of it all stood Gideon Rusk. He wore the kind of smile you only see on people who believe history is about to choose them. Calm, confident, practiced, a man who knew the cameras loved him, a man who knew the country was listening. He leaned toward the mic, lifted one hand in greeting, and began to speak. And then, a sound snapped through the air. Not a boom, not a roar, a dry crack, sharp enough to cut straight through the cheering like a blade. Rusk's body reacted before his mind did. He flinched just a fraction. Then his hand rose to his ear, and under the harsh stage lights, everyone saw it, clear as a signal flare, a thin line of blood. Not much, just a streak, bright red against skin. But it was enough, because in an instant, the crowd didn't see a man bleeding. They saw vulnerability. They saw fear. They saw the possibility that the next shot wouldn't graze anything. They saw death standing close enough to touch. The rally erupted. Screams, shoving, people ducking, stumbling over chairs, spilling drinks, knocking over barriers as they tried to disappear into the mass of bodies. Secret Service agents surged forward like a living shield, black suits, earpieces, hands gripping Rusk's shoulders, pushing him down, dragging him away. Cameras shook violently, news crews scrambling, footage jerking left and right, zooming in and out like the world had suddenly lost balance. And over it all, over the chaos, the panic, the metallic scream of fear, one phrase kept repeating: "Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired!" Then, almost as quickly as it began, it seemed to end. The broadcast lens caught a figure on a rooftop, a silhouette, a rifle shape, a posture that screamed intent. And then another crack. The silhouette collapsed. The body dropped out of frame. And within moments, the message spread across every screen, every ticker, every breaking news banner. The shooter has been neutralized. A neat sentence, a clean conclusion, the kind of ending people crave because it lets them breathe again, because it lets them believe the danger is over, because it lets them go back to sleep. Hours later, the FBI stepped up to a forest of microphones. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Officials stood in a careful line, faces composed, voices steady. They announced what the public wanted to hear. The suspect had been eliminated. The weapon had been recovered. There was no remaining threat. The situation was under control. And on paper, it sounded perfect. Too perfect. Because perfect stories are usually the ones written in advance. There were questions no one answered. Why did a security camera feed lose signal for a few critical seconds? Seconds that just happened to line up with the most important moment of the night. Why was the crime scene locked down so fast, so aggressively, that it felt less like emergency response and more like a rehearsal finally performed in public? Why did certain witnesses get escorted away before they could speak? Why did the rooftop footage look oddly convenient? And then there was the strangest detail of all. When the shooter's profile was released, it matched a name that, according to older records, should have been dead for years, a name that supposedly vanished long ago. So if the real suspect was already dead, then who exactly fell on that rooftop? The truth was sitting behind the stage lights, behind the press conference, behind the comforting headlines. The man who died wasn't the real trigger. He was a decoy, a stand-in, a disposable body meant to carry the weight of the story, so the story could be sealed shut quickly and permanently before the public ever reached for the truth. a coffin lid. Because while everyone stared up at the rooftop, the real shooter had already slipped away into the dark. And here's the part that should make your skin go cold. That miss wasn't entirely a mistake. Someone wanted the bullet to graze the ear, just enough to draw blood, just enough to shock the nation, just enough to make every headline scream the same message: it could happen again. Fear is powerful. Fear changes votes. Fear changes laws. Fear changes how people beg for protection. And that night, someone served fear in the cleanest possible dose, small enough to survive, large enough to tremble. Because if Rusk had died right there, the world might have exploded too soon. The reaction would have been uncontrolled, messy, unpredictable. And whoever planned this didn't want unpredictable. They wanted timing. They wanted escalation. They wanted a second shot, one that would land at the exact moment it could do maximum damage. In the shadows, a closed-door meeting took place among people who never appear on camera. No cheering crowds, no flags, no microphones, just a dark room, quiet voices, and confidential folders laid out like weapons on a table. And in that room, a simple agreement was made. Cold, calm, unanimous. This wasn't the real shot, because the real shot was still coming. And when it came, it wouldn't just kill a man. It would be designed to point a finger cleanly, convincingly, at the one enemy the world was always ready to blame: Russia. A perfect package of blame, a perfect spark, a perfect reason. Months later, far from that stage, far from that crowd, far from the bright lights and the breaking news banners, there was only a roadside diner, a neon sign humming softly in the night, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, a bell above the door chiming every time someone stepped inside, a place so ordinary you'd never imagine it had anything to do with presidents or war. And behind the counter was a waiter named Evan, clumsy, forgetful, almost harmless, the kind of guy who apologized too much and laughed at the wrong moments. He lived on the kindness of the owner, Lena, a woman who didn't ask too many questions, because sometimes people come to small towns to disappear. Evan didn't know where he came from. He didn't remember who he used to be. He didn't even know what his hands were capable of. But somewhere out there, someone did. And somewhere in the dark, that second shot was still being prepared, which meant Evan, this quiet, forgetful waiter in a quiet, forgetful town, was about to be pulled straight into the center of a conspiracy big enough to shake the world. Because if Gideon Rusk was still alive, then the story wasn't over. It had only just begun.
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late-night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.
The roadside diner slipped back into its usual rhythm, as if the world outside had never hovered on the edge of explosion. Burnt coffee lingered in the air, grease crackled softly on the grill, plates clinked, a radio hummed low, and the little bell above the door chimed every time someone stepped inside. Behind the counter, Evan wiped tables with the same nervous diligence he brought to everything else, apologizing too much, smiling at the wrong moments, moving like a man who was always half a second late to his own life. He looked harmless, almost forgettable, and that was exactly what made him so dangerous, because harmless people don't have secrets that can shake a country. Lena, the owner, watched him from the register. Tough eyes, tired posture, a woman who had learned how to keep a place running even when the world refused to be kind. She didn't need to raise her voice. A single look said enough. Careful, slow down, don't spill it again. Evan nodded quickly, flashed an embarrassed grin, and turned away. Not from Lena, but from the television in the corner. It was playing the same footage again and again and again. Gideon Rusk on stage, the crack of a shot, the blood on the ear, the screaming crowd, the headline that never stopped breathing. People called it a miracle, a near miss, proof that fate still had mercy. But Evan didn't hear miracle. He heard something else, a sound behind the sound, a pressure in his skull, like a locked door being slammed shut from the inside. And for a moment, just a moment, his vision swam, as if the diner lights had turned into an interrogation lamp, as if the air had thinned into a sterile white room he couldn't quite remember. Then it passed, and Evan forced another smile. The bell above the door chimed. A man stumbled in, drunk, loud, angry at the world, the kind of trouble small towns get used to swallowing. He bumped a chair, cursed under his breath, and shoved his way toward the counter. Conversations in the diner softened. A few heads lowered. Someone pretended to read a menu they didn't need. Lena stepped forward, calm but firm, like she'd done this 100 times. "Hey," she said, voice controlled, "you need to go outside." The man ignored her. He slammed his palm on the counter. Bam! The sound snapped through the room, a warning shot without a gun. And then, metal flashed. A knife. Not a big one, not dramatic, just enough to change everything. Someone gasped. Someone whispered no like a prayer. Evan stood still, frozen, not because he was brave, because his mind couldn't decide whether this was real or something he'd lived before. And then his body answered for him. Not panic, not chaos, control. Evan moved like a switch had been plugged, like the clumsy waiter had been unplugged and replaced with someone else entirely. He shifted aside at the last instant, caught the attacker's wrist, and in one sharp, efficient motion, the knife was no longer a threat. It happened so fast the diner couldn't process it. One blink, and the drunk man was on the floor. Not dead, just stunned, disarmed, out of the fight. The room went silent, because silence is what fear becomes when it doesn't know where to look. Evan stared down at the man, then at his own hands. His fingers trembled, not from effort, from disbelief, as if he was watching someone else wear his skin. Lena didn't move at first. She wasn't afraid of the drunk. She'd seen men like that before. What frightened her was Evan, the precision, the timing, the way he had known exactly what to do without thinking. That wasn't luck, that was training, and Evan wasn't supposed to have any. The bell chimed again. A new customer walked in, but the air changed instantly, like a storm cloud sliding across the sun. This man wore a dark jacket, nothing flashy, nothing memorable, except for the eyes. Cold, steady, the eyes of someone who measured rooms the way other people measured weather. He looked straight at Evan and didn't blink, not once. And then he spoke, quiet enough that a few people could hear, but heavy enough that the whole diner felt it. "You should be dead." Lena stepped in front of Evan immediately. "Wrong guy," she said, sharp and protective, but the stranger didn't even glance at her. He kept staring at Evan, like he was checking a serial number, like he'd found a lost asset. Evan's heartbeat stumbled, and a familiar sensation crawled up his spine, the sensation of being hunted. Not by anger, not by emotion, by purpose. Everything shattered in a single second. The stranger's hand moved, too fast to track clearly, and Evan reacted without understanding how. He grabbed Lena and yanked her down hard, pulling her below the counter as something slammed into the wall behind them. There was no time to think, only movement. They scrambled into the narrow kitchen, tight space, sharp corners, hanging pans, hot surfaces, the kind of place where accidents happen even on calm days. Tonight wasn't calm. Metal clanged, a chair toppled, footsteps slipped on a damp patch of floor. Evan shoved a door open with his shoulder, dragged Lena through, then turned, breathing hard, eyes scanning, instincts leading him down a path his memory couldn't explain. And that was the terrifying part. Evan didn't know who he was, but he knew how to survive. He knew which way to run. He knew where not to stand. Like his body remembered a life his mind couldn't hold. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The stranger was gone. A back door swung slightly in the night air, letting in a thin ribbon of cold. Outside, the world was quiet again. Inside, the diner looked wrecked,
chairs crooked, utensils scattered, customers frozen in shocked silence. Evan didn't chase. He simply stood there, chest rising and falling, as if he had just dodged a bullet he never saw coming. Lena still crouched low, eyes wide. Slowly, she reached down near the kitchen floor and picked up something. Small, round, cold, a coin. Engraved with a strange symbol, sharp lines, deliberate marks, the kind of insignia that isn't decoration, it's identification. Lena turned it over in her palm. "What is this?" she whispered. Evan took it, and the moment his skin touched the metal, the world cracked. A flash of white, a sterile room with no windows, a voice speaking through a recorder, calm and emotionless, a phrase that landed like a blade between his ribs. "Target is Rusk." Evan jerked his hand back as if the coin had burned him. His breathing sharpened, his eyes unfocused, seeing something that wasn't the diner anymore. Lena grabbed his arm. "Evan, what did you just remember?" Evan didn't answer right away, because he had finally understood something that terrified him more than the knife, more than the stranger, more than the coin itself. If that phrase was real, if Rusk's name belonged in Evan's memory, then Evan wasn't a bystander. He wasn't an accident. He was part of the story. And whatever happened on that campaign stage, whatever the FBI had packaged for the public, whatever decoy had died on a rooftop, it wasn't finished, not even close. Evan looked at the coin again, and in his gut, certainty settled like stone. This had only just begun.
The coin sat in Evan's palm like a piece of winter, small, round, and impossibly cold. Lena stared at him as if he had suddenly become a stranger standing in her kitchen. "Rusk," she said carefully. "Who is Rusk to you?" Evan swallowed. He couldn't remember his own past, couldn't picture his childhood, couldn't recall the face he used to wake up with, couldn't even tell you what city he was born in, but he remembered the feeling that came with that name. Not admiration, not politics, a weight, a job, a target. And underneath it all, the sick certainty that once upon a time, he had been the kind of man who made other people disappear. Lena reached for her phone. "We call the police," she said. Evan stopped her hand with a firmness that didn't match the clumsy waiter she thought she knew. "No," he said. "If you call, they'll get here before the police do." He didn't say it like a guess. He said it like a memory, like he had watched that exact mistake unfold again and again until it became a rule carved into his bones. Lena's eyes searched his face. "Who are they?" Evan didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, because the word still hadn't returned to him, but the fear had. He turned the coin over. On the back, etched so small you'd miss it in normal light, was a string of numbers. Not decorative, not random, precise. Lena leaned in. "Coordinates?" she whispered. Evan nodded, and for the first time that night, the hesitation disappeared from his posture. Something inside him clicked into place, like a compass finding north. They left the diner without turning on the main lights. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. Wind slid through the neon glow, making the sign hum like a warning. Lena drove. Evan sat in the passenger seat, the coin in his fist, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the windshield as if he could hear footsteps in the silence. The road pulled them away from the safety of familiarity and into something colder, something waiting. Lena tried to keep her voice steady. "You really think someone followed us?" Evan didn't look at her. "It's not think, it's certainty." The highway thinned into rural roads. Headlights swept over bare trees and abandoned fences, the kind of landscape that looks harmless in daylight and predatory at night. Lena's knuckles tightened on the wheel. Evan kept scanning, not with his eyes alone, but with his entire body, like a man listening for a sound no one else could detect. Finally, the coordinates led them to a place that didn't want to be found, an old storage facility on the edge of nowhere. Rows of metal doors, no sign, no guard, no cameras, at least none you'd notice unless you knew where to look. Lena parked, and the moment they stepped out, the air felt different, dead, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Evan walked forward, not slowly, not cautiously, straight to one specific door, like he'd been here 100 times. Lena followed, unsettled. "You said you don't remember anything," she whispered. Evan didn't answer, because the terrifying truth was he didn't remember, but his hands did. A rusty padlock hung from the latch. Evan touched it, and his fingers moved with quick, practiced confidence. Twist, press, lift. The lock opened far too fast for luck. Lena stared at him. "How did you—" Evan's jaw tightened. He didn't want to know the answer, because every time his body remembered, it was proof that his past wasn't just hidden, it was violent, and it was close. The metal door groaned as it rolled upward. Inside, the locker held a neat arrangement of objects that felt out of place in a forgotten storage unit. A small metal box, an old phone with the SIM slot pried open, broken on purpose, a USB drive, and a thick envelope labeled in bold, uppercase letters, "False Shot." The words sat there like a confession. Lena's voice dropped. "Evan, is this yours?" Evan's throat tightened. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He simply reached in, opened the metal box, and pulled out a battered laptop. If this was his past, then it had been waiting for him to return. He plugged the USB in. The laptop whirred to life like an old animal waking up. A video file opened, and suddenly the campaign night returned through a different lens. A rooftop, a figure standing in exactly the right place, too perfectly framed, too perfectly timed, like someone had placed him there for the cameras. Then a crack of a sniper shot. The figure dropped, clean, simple, finished. Except in the corner of the frame, far from where the public was told to look, there was movement, another shadow, a second presence, not falling, retreating into darkness the instant the ending was delivered. Lena's breath caught. Evan's eyes didn't blink, because in that second, the truth became undeniable. The dead man was never the shooter. He was the decoy. A text file popped up on the screen, short and brutal. "Decoy confirmed." And beneath it, another folder. A folder that made Lena's blood go cold before she even opened it. "True shot. Blame package. Russ." Lena whispered, barely audible. "They're planning to kill him for real." Evan felt his pulse beating inside his ear, not because he was shocked, because a part of him, some buried part, had expected this all along. He clicked deeper. Documents flashed by. Fake passports, anonymous transfers, encrypted messages, a carefully curated trail that didn't just suggest an enemy, it practically screamed one name: Russia. Everything was arranged to point in a single direction, clean and convincing, like a stage built for a war the world was already prepared to believe in. And that's when Evan understood the most horrifying detail of all. The grazing shot wasn't an accident, it was intentional, a controlled dose of fear, enough to shake the country, enough to prime the headlines, but not enough to ignite global chaos too early. Because the real plan required timing, maximum impact, the kind of moment that could tip nations into decisions they couldn't undo. Lena's voice trembled. "So that first bullet, it was meant to miss." Evan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The evidence was already speaking. Then the lights in the facility died. Not flickered, not dimmed, died like someone had cut the power with a knife. Darkness swallowed the locker. Lena froze. Evan grabbed her wrist and pulled her back into the corner, instinctive, silent. Outside, footsteps, slow, deliberate, not the stumbling walk of a drunk, the measured pace of professionals who knew they owned the night. A radio crackled. A voice came through, calm and mechanical. "Confirm target. Retrieve the faulty asset." Lena's face went pale. "Asset?" Evan's eyes snapped to the laptop screen, the only light left in the room. And there, as if the computer had been waiting for this exact moment, a line appeared, as cold as a verdict. Asset ID, Evan Cross, terminate. Evan's breath stopped, because now he finally had a name, and it came paired with a death order. Somewhere outside that locker door, someone shifted metal against metal, quiet, precise. The sound wasn't loud,
It didn't need to be. It was the kind of sound that says one thing: we're here. Evan pulled Lena closer into the shadow, and in the darkness, with the laptop glowing like a warning sign, one truth locked into place. He wasn't just a witness, he was a loose end, and loose ends don't get to walk away.
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late-night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.